So, the hardest thing for me is the moment that Rachel died. Throughout her treatment, since the day of her diagnosis and throughout the progression of her disease and the cancer, we didn't talk much about her dying because we were so dead fast and so sure she was going to beat this. It's the only way to be. But there's a part of me that wishes that I had spoke to her about it, and I didn't bring it up or talk about it much, because when I did, I got the sense that she didn't want to talk about it, and she needed someone to just be sure she was going to survive. And that's what I did, but part of me wishes that I talked to her about it, because I wonder if maybe she kept her thoughts about it somewhat to herself so that I wouldn't react heavily. And it was a slow build up, but it wasn't, in my mind, it felt so fast. We had been to her oncologist after she had over 2,000 hours of chemo. Having 72-hour infusions each time, and it had been a year, and the chemo wasn't working anymore because Rachael, it had been weeks of Rachael not that sleep that I talked about in the earlier podcasts, that beautiful sleep that came after her first infusion, was the thing that it was kind of like a barometer for how well Rachel's pain was being managed, was her ability to rest and sleep peacefully. And she started to not sleep at all. She would sit up in bed because if she laid backwards, and this was a common theme in her last month, last 6 weeks, really her last few months, 8 weeks at least, she would sit Indian style throughout the night. She would nod off, but she could not lay back. She could not lay down. She couldn't recline because of this awful pain. The cancer was growing in her stomach, and when she laid down, she could feel her tumors pressing against her skin, her organs, and it got real bad. I wasn't sleeping either because she wasn't sleeping, and I was scared, and there was a few nights where I would kneel beside the bed while she was nodding off and just pray and cry, and at that point, we were both starting to lose our mind, and just the fear of losing her was so. I couldn't imagine sitting here right now. I couldn't imagine sitting here. We did speak about her dying eventually while she was in the hospital, and what we always said was that if she were gonna die, what she wanted, she said, if anything bad happens, please make it so we're just laying in bed together. And and I would say, I would promise her that, of course, that would be true. But I would also say, if you're going to die, I want to go with you. And I meant it. I meant it. if it were socially acceptable for me to have found a catalyst to make it so that could happen, I would have done it. I would have absolutely done it. And the thing that's so hard to get past is, we live this beautiful life together. I mean, this hard and wonderful life. We lived together for so long, and I couldn't imagine being without her. And so her pain got very bad, and like I said, we weren't sleeping. I was starting to lose it a little bit, and she was too, obviously. And there was a morning where she was feeling dreadful pain, and I kept asking her, please, can we go to the emergency room? We did go to the emergency room a couple times, and they made her wait. And she didn't want to wait in an emergency room. She wanted to either be at home suffering or be seen right away and have someone fix this. When she did get admitted to the ER, it was a horrible night. The doctors, she called the ambulance herself, actually. It was a morning she called the ambulance herself, she called 911, which Rachael doesn't do. If anybody was quick to want to call 911, it was me, but I was in the shower, I remember, and Rachael just called. She said, Jed, she was on the floor, and she said, I called 911, they're here. So I rushed to get my clothes on to follow her to the emergency room, but I didn't go in the ambulance with her. When we got there, she was admitted, and they said that there was a perforation in her bowels, a hole that had formed in her bowels. And now we know that the Avastin they added to her chemotherapy is a newer drug, and it inhibits the growth of new blood vessels. So when you have a wound happening, which was the tumor pressing against the lining of her colon, it's not unable to heal. And it causes some of your current blood vessels to die. And so some of her bowel, her bile was spilling into her into outside of the abdominal wall and the wall of the colon, and that can be, you can die quickly and painfully from that. And the doctors told us that, and it was really late at night, and I called her family, and her family came. And then the doctors asked her what she wanted to do, and it was the first time she was asked comfort or longevity, and she said longevity, and so they started to look into whether they could do a surgery to repair it. But what happens in the ER is you're talking to doctors that aren't oncologists and aren't currently aware of your tumor, exactly aware of just how much tumor mass they're dealing with, because if they're going to open you up and this tumor mass is just everywhere, then it's just going to cause a massive spread, and it'll get out of control. The cells will divide fast. And so they said, we're not going to do surgery, it's too dangerous, but we are going to put a gastro tube in your stomach to allow, first of all, your fluids to drain, basically, so your fluids will drain. But that was the day one of her not being able to eat food in her mouth, or drink much water or anything. And that was close to 2 months before she passed away. And close to 2 months. It was more, we were in the hospital for about a month, about 4 weeks after that. So maybe six weeks total before of not eating any food. And you know, so we stayed in, she was in the hospital for a month because they didn't know, they were trying to think of ways that they could fix this problem or just make her comfortable. She didn't, we didn't express that we wanted to go home. Was scared to go home. I don't think we realized, or she realized that the level of hospice care, and it's also very scary knowing you're going to get hospice care, which the hospice is just trying to make you comfortable with everybody aware and accepting that you're dying. And Rachel hated that, didn't want the world to accept she was dying, and she would take offense to it because she didn't want to die. And so we lived in a hospital room it started in the ICU. We lived there for about maybe a week and a half, and in the ICU, and which is very quiet, and she got a lot of care. And in that ICU, we were able to enjoy each other a little bit again after weeks of her not sleeping, and just we couldn't really enjoy much time because of the pain, all day pain for her, just nonstop pain. Every time I would cook something, and no matter how light I cooked for her, it would cause her pain. And, over the first 2 weeks, she lost weight and lost more weight and lost more weight until when she passed away, she was mostly skin and bones. And in that hospital, the ICU, because of the level of care, she was able to sleep again. She found the bed, the position, and the right amount of drugs where she slept a little bit. And the ICU is very quiet, so I slept next to her every night, and this pull-out chair that pulled out into a bed, and I would give anything to be back there in that room. And I think we started to realize each day, every time that she was pain-free, it was a good moment, and we enjoyed it. And we were just so close, and especially living in a hospital room together, we just got so close. I learned how to deal with the machines, and just every little nuance of her preference and what bothered her, and anything the sicker that a patient becomes with cancer, the less you can do to comfort them, and the more you need the help of stronger drugs and more technical advanced procedures. But I think about the morning that she died. It's so hard to move past because it's the end of your life. I mean, there's nothing more real than that. And I just wanted to know, I want to know what was going on in her brain. I spoke to her, we had